Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Tom Hedegard, and now it's Meet the Media, where each week I talk to correspondents from Russian media outlets based in London about the week's top stories. In the studio today, we have Margarita Stewart from the Russian newspaper Argumenty Fakty, Kommersant's Viktor Balagarde, RIA Novosti's Alexander Smatrov, and Mary Tmorova from Novaya Gazeta. Last week, a Russian former banker, German Gorbuntsov, was gunned down by an unknown assailant outside his flat near Canary Wharf. He's now in a critical but stable condition in hospital. He is known to have been involved in some financial disputes in Russia and Moldova, and recently testified in the trial of 3 men accused of attempted murder against another Russian businessman in 2009. There's been some talk of the increasing presence of Russian organised crime in London, whether it's on the rise, and if the British capital is a new venue for Russian crime. Alexander, if I could start with you, do you think London needs to be worried about Russian crime?
No, I think it's still an isolated incident rather than a trend coming. And we tried with my colleagues to figure out and to remember any similar stories within at least last 10 years, and we couldn't remember anything apart from Litvinenko case, which was quite different. And again, it was from the beginning a little bit more sensationalist than it became apparent afterwards. Like submachine gun or machine gun even from the beginning, then it was downgraded to a pistol, the firearm used. Then there was some reports he was with a mysterious blonde while being married with a son in Moscow. And all these sorts of things were surrounding the story. And again, there were quite a few lines from the police, so that's why it was a wide room for speculation from the media. But then all of them were a little bit downgraded, and I think it will go to a more like common story afterwards.
I mean, one thing that's troubled most people in Britain is simply who is he? Do you have any information as to who he might be, Victor?
Well, no. Like any other journalist and like any other reader of the news, I was shocked to read those news last week, and there was an element of shock. And unfortunately, his surname for me was unfamiliar until last week, and being, I cannot say an ordinary banker, but being a banker who has been involved in different scandals in Moldova and in Russia previously, and being involved in quite famous scandals in financial world in Russia. Especially there was a big scandal with Bank, and I understand Mr. Gorbuntsov is also somehow involved in the case of assassination of the deputy of the central bank, Kozlov, which happened 3 or 4 years now ago in Moscow. And but his surname was very unfamiliar to me. So there was an element of shock when you hear that just in Isle of Dogs, just few miles away from you, there is a assassination attempt on a Russian banker. But after going deeper into the case and also trying to do our own research, what I found out is that in the 90s there were a few cases when Russians were shot in London, and there was a time when one of the Russian businessman's wife her body was found in the boot of the car in London, and that body stayed there for over a month. And there was a case when there were a shooting on Russian businessmen in Knightsbridge in 90s, and the people who were attempting this shooting, or who took part in this shooting, were traced by the CCTV camera somewhere in France. They used Eurostar, and they flew away to France through Eurostar. So this is not the first case when we see Russian businessmen being attacked on the streets of London, especially if you remember cases in Greece or in Spain or south of France. In the last 10 years, we had few cases where Russian businessmen were attacked in Europe. But it doesn't mean that London will cease to be a safe place for Russian businessmen. I still have a deep confidence that still you'll see on the streets of London very prominent Russian oligarchs just walking by without any bodyguards, which you would never imagine to see such scenes somewhere in Moscow. So London will still remain a safe place for Russian businessmen to come here and settle themselves here. But obviously, if you do have some people who are not happy about the way you did your business, the way you are doing your business now, or the way you did it in the past, they can get you anywhere. They can get you in Paris, in New York, or in London.
And just a reminder, you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name's Tom Hedegard, and this is Meet the Media. In the studio, we have Margarita Stewart from the Russian newspaper Argumenty Fakty, Victor Balagade from Kommersant, UK, RIA Novosti's Alexander Smatrov, and Mary Tomohova from Novaya Gazeta. Mary, the last case that involved, a murder in this case, was Alexander Litvinenko in 2006. Immediately, many outlets in the UK are comparing those two cases. Do you think that's a miscomparison? Do you think there's value in that comparison? Or are these two cases completely different in your opinion?
Well, the thing is, the only thing they have in common is that they're both Russian and they both live in London. The Litvinenko case is completely different because what happened to him is completely another case. First of all, he wasn't doing any banking or finances, etc. He's a former FSB agent, so that's completely another case. The thing was, coming back to what Victor said about London being a safe place, the thing is, why these things keep on happening in London or in South France or in Egypt or somewhere else? It's because some part of Russian elite or really rich people, they move somewhere Western. So the reason why it's happening in here, it's just, it's really, really sole case. But lots of Russian people do live in here, and eventually, sorry to say this, but one person might be shot once in 10 years.
And Margarita, during the 90s, Victor made a reference to it earlier, that Russian criminality was being exported from Russia to, in the mid-90s, areas in Eastern Europe, like Hungary, for example. Do you think that London could be another venue in a similar way?
So already now, a lot of the Russian business people already moved to London, and I would say maybe around 20% of big Russian business already in the UK, and people be living in the UK. Sometimes their business in Moscow or somewhere else, but they're living in London. But I absolutely agree with Alexander. London shouldn't be worried too much. That's like a Russian mafia coming here. So no, if tomorrow, for example, just one Chinese man will kill another Chinese man, so we will not say that Chinese mafia coming to London. Another thing what be not worry me, but yes, it was a lot of shooting in 90s, like the wild 90s. Then is that's zero was just what we say. It start to calm down, and during that decade, the most of people been killed. That were journalists. But what we see the last maybe 4 or 5 years, again start to show business people and political people. I don't think that we are going back to 90s, but it seems like it's starting again re-alteration of the world. I don't say that the whole world. I mean in Russia, and there's a difference between 90s and nowadays. In 90s, all this was more about natural resources and the government property. But now seeing that the group of risk, it is people, business people, bankers, and politics. So now there's all that re-alterations are coming about political influences and big financial flows. Those banks. So there's new level, but there's old barbarian methods. The shootings is like a feel. You have a feeling like you're in electronic games. Whereas assassins walking on the street and just shooting people like chickens. But all those games, they're in medieval time. But we are well in 21st century, and still we have this one. That's really worry.
And just a reminder, you're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name's Tom Hedegard, and this is Meet the Media. In the studio, we have Margarita Stewart from the Russian newspaper Argumenty Fakty, Victor Balagade from Kommersant, UK, RIA Novosti's Alexander Smatrov, and Mary Tomohova from Novaya Gazeta. In this case, the Daily Mail wrote an article saying that this could be the beginning of Russian gangsterism in London. Does that perpetuate an already ugly stereotype about Russia?
I would agree with that, but not. I wouldn't again. As I said, and Alexander said, it is not the case. Russian mafia was moving to London, but I read in Daily Mail it was as well some mothers they're talking, and they said since my case doesn't go on the streets, and it doesn't matter where it's happened. It's in Paris, London, New York, or say York or Edinburgh. If someone will shoot someone just in front of your house, people will think badly about the country. And that, excuse me, why you don't shoot each other is there? Why you coming here? We have enough of ours.
Yeah, it's mostly the consequence of this. And again, probably people just try to revive this Litvinenko case terror and some kind of ambiguity of this case. But then, if you're talking about the gun crime or knife crime in general, so there are much more chances to be shot or wounded without any Russians involved, because the level of gun crime and knife crime in Britain itself is high enough, and probability to be involved in this without any Russian involvement is still very high. So it shouldn't be directed only into the Russian side. And the other thing I was about to add, actually, to the points already raised here about him personally, Gorbuntsov, I can tell you that we at RIA Novosti have a very extensive picture library, and we had only one picture of Gorbuntsov, and again it says how popular or well-known or the opposite he was. But now this picture is very famous. It was reproduced in many British newspapers. Not the best one, but still it was the only one. So he was quite a low-profile person. And the third thing about the Russians doing their business in London, and quite high-profile business, you can remember from even the book Londongrad. Even from the 90s, there were lots of schemes and lawyers and financiers who were working for Russians here, even the British people like Stephen Curtis, who was subsequently who died, and there were some allegations he was murdered by some kind of business conflicting interests. So they were dealing with Russians for many, many years, and for the most cases it was quite calm, but in some cases it ended up with some trouble, as this one.
This is the Voice of Russia. The London Bureau of the Voice of Russia is now live on digital radio and online, with news, comment and debate on weekdays between 4 and 7 p.m.
Apart from talking, what this case will, how this case will resonate in the British society, I would like to bring up an issue what the Russian community in England is talking after this took place on the streets of London. And there again, Russians are bringing up this issue of addressing this issue to the British immigration authorities, and they're saying, what are the kind of Russian businessmen which are led here to London? And yes, we do know that, and many of the Russians are grateful to the fact that UK became a safe haven for many of them due to the political turmoil in the country or some economical, somebody came here for the economical reasons, but we also know, and Russians are aware of that many of the, not criminals, but let's say corrupt officials or corrupt bankers are getting their way to UK and they're settling here. And this is actually what brings, this is one of the reasons what brings the Russian crime to London. So here you might be thinking maybe it's to the British immigration authorities to think more carefully whom they allow to enter the country, and maybe it's actually their responsibility to make sure that the Russians which are granted residence in this country are not attracting any criminal elements from their motherland.
Mary, did you want to come in on this?
Well, the thing is that Gorbuntsov, he was due to apply for the asylum in Britain, and it also comes with the politics, and that he was one of the people who was involved. There was assassination attempt of another banker in Moscow, which is Alexander Andreev, and he did a new written statement a few days ago, and he submitted to the court. And what Andreev said, that this might probably, have some connections with that, because Gorbuntsov is a good friend of his, and they've got, some mutual business together, and maybe that, this assassination attempt come back from years from while they were doing business in Russia. So we'll see.
And just a reminder, you're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. My name's Tom Hedegard, and this is Meet the Media. In the studio, we have Margarita Stewart from the Russian newspaper Argumenty Fakty, Viktor Balagade from Kommersant, UK, RIA Novosti's Alexander Smatrov, and Mary Timorova from Novaya Gazeta. What's the perception in Russia of elements of Russian criminality migrating to England? Is that resonating in Russian society in a way that the bad eggs in the Russian basket are moving to Britain?
Well, the thing with people from Russia, everyone thinks that if you're Russian and if you live in London, then you're either enormously rich, or you are a political assailant, or you had some financial stuff. So in there, the perception is if another person was killed in London, so it's, just a really rich douchebag. So that's how it is.
But do you think that the perception in Russia is that Britain is a soft touch for allowing criminals in Russia or the extremely wealthy to come and reside in London?
Definitely.
Yeah, but on the other hand, all of them want to come here and live in here.
Sorry, Margaret, you.
No, because absolutely now I don't know what is perspective about Russian here, but it's Great Britain in Russia now is it's like asylum for absolutely anyone actually. For anyone who needs asylum. So why you escape from your own country? That's because Gorbuntsov he used to say that I'm not going back to Russia. They will kill me, because he didn't say who there. So he knew who there. And what sort of people they're escaping from their own country to another country and and afraid to going back because they will kill. They said they will kill me. So yes, the Great Britain now is too soft touch, and I absolutely agree with what Victor said about the immigration system has to be a little bit more selective who they so they allow. It is very nice for economic. There's rich people coming here. But not everything is about the money and this economic. There's rich people bringing money, but they're bringing a lot of other things too with them. So I think they have to be careful. So I absolutely agree with Victor.
Yeah, because I was just about to add, if a Russian official, especially people from the prosecutor's office, they mention someone hiding from Russian prosecution, the first place they would mention will be Britain. And it has the reputation in Russia as a country which protects everyone who claims to be politically persecuted and so on. And the experience of all the extradition cases heard in this country was that the British courts never allowed anyone, especially in a high-profile case, to be sent back to Russia for prosecution and for justice, because there were worries and reservations among them about fairness of justice in Russia and so on. There were some lower-profile cases when there were some extradition decisions made in favor of the Russian prosecution, but they were never done the decisions, because I remember there were a couple of criminal cases when there was a decision to extradite people back to Russia, but then those people just escaped and went away from the jurisdiction. So basically there is reputation still in place, and that's why people, ordinary people and media, they warm up this perception that Britain is a safe haven for those who want to escape Russian law.
It's an interesting. I think probably after this case they will not think like that. I'm escaped from Russia because they will kill me there. Because if they want to kill you, they will kill you here too. So probably now the perspective will change
and as for Gorbuntsov, by the way, there was an article in the Times, I think yesterday, quoting his lawyer in Russia, who implied that there were some elements connected to the Russian Interior Ministry and to FSB, the Russian Security Service, who might be after Gorbuntsov.
Yeah, I just want to add just one another point that this case might probably be an alarm for another Russian businessman or people who used to do business in Russia, because maybe for them, London might not seem as safe as it used to be before, because they see, a former banker was shot, maybe I'm going to be the next one.
And so maybe it's because I know there's a British justice system. They don't send, or for example, they didn't send Berezovsky back because the other side, we don't know what will happen to him there. Mm-hmm. So now Russia can argue, so we know what will happen to him here, but we don't know what will happen to him in London. So he'll be much safer.
If we can move on to any stories that have caught your eye over the last week, other than the Gorbuntsov saga. If I start with you, Alexander, if that's all right.
The other day, I've got a very interesting and curious press release from the British National Party. Think about that. And they have their leader, Nick Griffin, as a member of European Parliament, coming to Russia to observe the presidential elections, and his conclusion was that the Russian democracy was much fairer than the British one. Especially he compares the Russian presidential elections and access to debate panels with London mayoral elections, and he reproached the British electoral bodies and especially British media, that they invite only 3 or 4 mainstream candidates, 3 major parties, and sometimes dilute them with the Green opposition. And they did not invite any of the other, including the BNP candidate, their press secretary, Carlos Cotillo. So his conclusion was quite favorable for Russia on the first side, but on the second thought, maybe you would not like to be praised by such people like BNP.
As a Russian journalist aware of the allegations of electoral fraud in Russia, what's your reaction to this comparison?
Yeah, it was very nicely put, because he just took only one aspect, access to debates. And from this point of view, Russian elections was fairer than the London mayoral elections. But he didn't put into the wider context, and so it leaves a lot of room to think about how it would be if it was put in the bigger context.
Moving on to you, Victor.
Well, my piece of news today is the Olympic news. It's because we're in London, we're in the Olympic City, and there will be lots of events happening here in summer, and especially there will be lots of events happening in the Russian community in London. Because as we all know, the next Olympics after London is shifting to Sochi, to Russia. And one of the news which I wanted to highlight today is the arrival of a legendary ship, Krusenstern, which is coming to London docks in the end of July and beginning of August. This is the second largest sail ship which is left in the world. It has been it was initially built in Germany prior to the Second World War, and then later given to Russia as part of reparation. And this legendary ship will come here in the Olympic weeks. It will be placed in Canary Wharf, and anyone who would like to look around and see and anyone who is romantic and who likes the pirate stories and all that stuff, he's welcome to come to go there and just have a look around and feel what is it to be a sailor.
But she sails across the world every year. I think they've got lots of different cruises every year.
And it's not that's right. Port. Yes, and it's not the first time they're taking part in Olympics. They were there in, I think, in Vancouver when the Olympics took part in Canada. I think they also kind of docked the ship in Canada. So this is the second time when they're taking part in the Olympics.
Oh.
And moving on to you, Mary.
Well, the thing that right now in Russia, social media are taking a huge part, in all the people's life. So this news came up only yesterday. I just want to move back to something nice apart from assassinations of another bankers. The thing is, the news which had a huge turmoil yesterday in social media is about our President Medvedev cat Dorothy, who got lost. So it looks like all the presidential administration and all the people over there spent the whole day looking for the cat. And all people, on Facebook and Contact and another social media, everyone was tweeting about it. So after the elections, it's been a little shift from the political news to just domestic. Yeah. So.
All the king's horses and all the king's men
and all the king's cats
and put him in his place again. Yeah, but
he was found eventually.
He was found, but Medvedev himself tweeted with using all this Twitter jargon. So as for the cat, according to sources close to Dorofei, he's safe and it's nothing to worry about. So this was his tweet.
Yeah, so we have,
nice.
as David Cameron has his own cat in Downing Street number 10, and so do we as well.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Margarita.
My story is a little bit spooky, scientific story, or potentially could be scary. Is Imperial College of Salon, I think it's an Imperial College. They created handmade DNA. So here, and this is great. Yes, they say, wow, now we can create from this the DNA everything what we care. So what we want. We want just new form of lives. We can be new flowers. New flora and even new fuel. From one hand is yes, wow, but from other hand it's a little bit chill. As I had a chill, it was down my spine, because we all remember this scientific fantasy movies from maybe middle of last century. What was looking at was why that's scary, because that's just a movie. And it's 10-20 years that become possible, and if this will come. We remember that it was few Hollywood movies when someone created some little cell, and this cell start to grow up and out of control, and then it's almost take the world. And we thought, okay, that's just the scary movie. But actually that's happening now is in front of us. Now the show to us this little cell DNA, and that we can do everything with what we want. We can put this, put this here, this there. Now it will start to grow. It will be a new form of life, and nobody knows what this life will be. Because if it is DNA, it can have actually a brain and anything. It's great. It's nice revolution. But God, who knows what could happen from the... So on this majority, not...
That's very scary.
Potential it could be, but...
On that rather unsettling note, I suppose, we'll bring this edition of Meet the Media to a close. Thank you to all my guests, Margarita Stewart from the Russian newspaper Argumenty Fakty, Kommersant's Viktor Balagarde, RIA Novosti's Alexander Smatrov, and Mary Tomova from Novaya Gazeta. You've been listening to Meet the Media on the Voice of Russia in London. I'm Tom Hedegard. Stay with us. We'll be back after the news.